This is Kenya's the number one opera in the world, according to Thorin. You're watching Thorin channel, that are also known as the number one existence fan in the world.
Following the major where they failed to secure a Legends spot, G2 has made the tough decision of making a roster move. They've taken bodyy out of the lineup and they've replaced him with AmaNEk, formerly of Misfits, LDLC more recently. So okay, as usual, we'll start off with the player removed, bodyy. Absolutely the right move to make. Like, regardless almost of who you're recruiting, I think bodyy in this particular G2 era of when you've seen him, particularly in the existence lineup and now this more recent lineup with Shox as in-game leader, he's been a complete waste of space. He doesn't provide fragging in the server. It's not like he has a specialist role that he plays that he does super well with all intangibles that don't appear on the stat sheet. He just looks like an incredibly average player who hasn't been playing well for over a year at this point in time. My problem with him as well is people forget this guy isn't a rookie. He came into the scene and was playing on G2 in 2016. Guys, that was 3 years ago now. Like, this guy had excuses made for him in 2017. Well, you know, it's the French super team, all these other big names, NBK, Apex, Kenny S, Shox. Where's the space for poor bodyy, right? Okay, I can sort of see that. So then he had the lineup with NBK. Oh, now's your chance, bodyy. Nothing. Then you had the lineup with Existence. And I told you when that lineup was made that bodyy is one of the people that Existence is going to need to potentially transform and get more out of, because obviously Smiths and Existence in theory aren't going to provide the fragging. Little did we know at the time in terms of Existence. So it's now literally been, of the 3 full years this guy has played CSGO, 2 of them he's fucking sucked. He's legitimately been incredibly underwhelmed for 2 of those years. The 1 year he wasn't was when he had all these mad fraggers screaming Shox going off in his team, RPK playing pretty well, and his job then was kind of the same fragging output, but it was just don't die, don't fuck the game up, just do okay. So I've actually been very underwhelmed by this guy as a player. I also think it's a really bad sign that he not only didn't evolve under Existence, someone who's taken a lot of different players and found the right role for them and expanded their talents and being able to develop them as players. He not only didn't evolve under Existence, but the guy has now played under 5 different types of leadership. He had the first Shox in 2016 where Shox and Scream just fragged out. Shox played very aggressive in the team as an entry player. And at that point in time, there's not a lot of tactics. They were famously good on DOS 2, Cash, and then they would fall apart on maps like Train and Cobblestone, except when they just fragged out of control. They weren't a particularly tactical team. Then he had Shox 2, which was the French super team, where Shox made himself the bitch of the team, removed all his star elements, tried to focus on making the rest of the team, like Kenny S, go off and Apex and NBK. Okay, different style, didn't particularly work for bodyy there either. Then he had the brief period, a few lands, where NBK took over as in-game leader in 2018 when Shox was out of the lineup and Existence and Smiths were waiting to come back. Then he had the Existence of Smiths lineup, very underwhelming player overall there, and he didn't have any excuse. He wasn't coming back. He wasn't in some bizarre role he can't play. And now he's had, more recently, Shox again taking over leadership and doing some weird hybrid between the two, giving up more of his own individual game, but not exactly being that good overall and being a pretty poor team. So, quite frankly, I've given up on bodyy at this point in time. If he can turn his career around, well, good luck to him. I don't think it's going to happen. So, I'm glad he's gone generally. Then you go and you look at the player they've added, AmaNEk. Right, in light of the fact, the context of this move is there are not many players available. So you were going to have to compromise on who you picked anyway. It was going to be a flawed player. I get it based on availability. Scream's not available. I mean, he is technically, but people have shown they don't want to play with him, and who knows if he still wants to play with them. Vitality signed all their players late last year to big contracts, so in theory you're not getting any of those guys. You wouldn't want most of them anyway. Existence is gone. He was offered a spot in this G2 lineup. Instead, he chose not to play because he wasn't going to be the in-game leader. And Kiyoshima's off in Cloud9, arguably, aside from Ziwu, the best French player at the moment. So this team needed more firepower. You saw when they brought Lucky and Jax. Like, Jax isn't bringing big fragging. Lucky doesn't bring big fragging generally, but he's played his role well. They needed more firepower. Shox did very poorly at the major. Kenny S is good, but not great. And then who else was left? bodyy was underperforming. So they still lacked firepower in that lineup, just as they did with the Existence lineup, quite frankly. So for me, the problem here is I think the firepower that AmaNEk brings is a bit overrated. Now, it's mainly based on the Misfits period where people just didn't expect anything from that team and they were able to perform well. But when you look at the fact that under Sean Gares, he was playing as a secondary AWPer. He's playing with a good in-game leader, someone who can set up the game, someone who likes to use star players in the ways that they want to be used. I would have thought that's where he would develop if he's going to be a really, really strong player. I think he's been a decent player, above average player, I'd say, over that team in LDLC, but I don't see him as a star player. And interestingly enough, as I said there, he wasn't the primary AWPer, he was a secondary AWPer. Shazam was the primary AWPer in Misfits. Well, you might think coming in this team, he's not surely taking Kenny S's AWP, although at the moment fucking Shocks takes Kenny S's AWP, but let's ignore that pet peeve for a second. Shocks AWPing and taking Kenny S's AWP, two things I fucking hate in Counter-Strike. But in terms of AmaNEk, you'll notice in the post about him joining G2, it doesn't mention AWPing anywhere. It even says in the quote from him, not about him rather, we are therefore, which by the way, no one knows who was written by, some news poster for G2, we are therefore incredibly excited to announce that Francois AmaNEk Delony has agreed to join the G2 army. A strong rifler and lurker, AmaNEk doesn't just bring the firepower, but also comes with the brain, bringing additional strategic and tactical depth to the team. So that's what's interesting. Is first of all, they don't mention the AWP. They mention him as a rifler. So, okay, he did seem in Misfits in LDLC like a versatile player. I could believe he can play both rifle and AWP and be half decent. Okay, we need more riflers in this team, that's true. But the option to secondary AWP, that's going to be here. We've got Kenny S as our primary AWPer. Let's have a secondary AWP. Let's switch up where they play on maps so you don't know which AWPer you're facing. That could be a big boon for the team. That could be a big positive. In terms of the idea that he might be like a semi-in-game leader or a secondary call or something, that's exciting actually, because Shocks looks like he's losing his identity as a player again as he tries to find an identity as an in-game leader. And that's a very worrying sign, because Shocks was the one thing in G2 at the end of the existence lamp that was still good, that actually looked like he was quality and was playing at a legitimately respectable level for world Counter-Strike. So if this guy can bring anything in that respect, I like that. In fact, I hope they are going to use him as a lurker in this respect. If you look at this team, okay, you look at Lucky, he's more of an entry player. Jax is just going to do what he's told. Shocks has been playing more on the entry side of the equation more recently. Kenny S is an AWPer, like, takes the AWP duel. You could do with more lurk players in this team. In the old team with Existence, they had way too many passive players. I think they could make this guy work as a lurker. And if he's going to lurk, let him do some calling. Let him be the secondary caller. Let him free up Shocks on certain maps to just be a fragger. That's a move I could see which has some potential, which is weird because I wouldn't have picked him as in-game leader. But if you can backdoor that into being competent, that's interesting. Because if you look at the team now, you're going to see that more firepower and someone else to help with some of the in-game leading is actually what they need. Just, I don't think this is quite enough firepower. Because you look at the team now, Shocks was really bad at the major, but he was good in the latter part of last year, so I don't write him off entirely. I think, unfortunately, he's started to revert to 2017 I'm an in-game leader mode, and that's killing his game. That's why I hope AmaNEk's going to kind of lift the burden in some sense. Kenny S, as I referred to before, he was good. He was pretty good at the major. He started to get shit together towards the end of last year. Still nowhere near the Kenny S I remember, the very, very good player who should always be a top 10 player in the world. The numbers have started to look good, but they're not quite Kenny S numbers quite yet. So he's still on the road to recovery. Lucky, as I mentioned, stats aren't great, but he's a really good find. He looks like he really contributes well. He makes plays. He looks like a guy who has confidence, still a young player, still inexperienced. He's been the find of all these teams. Obviously, Ziwu's the find, except we already knew he was really good. But Lucky's the guy you would never have expected that out of nowhere they found, and actually looks like he has a place in top French teams. Jax has been so-so. I don't really like the move myself, but I don't really know who else they can pick up. You look at their map pool with this lineup that they had previously. So, remove Nuke, which they played once in 3 months. Realistically, we're right back to 2016, guys. They're a cash and dust 2 team. These are the maps they can win on. They're fairly shaky on all the tactical maps, Overpass, Train, Inferno, the Mirage is nothing to write home about. What have they got? So if they're going to play individually, they're going to play limited synergies between certain players on certain angles of maps or certain positions where I go first and you follow up, or he throws a flash and I go in. If you want to do simple shit like that and you want to frag out, you've got an okay lineup for that. You certainly need Kenny S and Shocks to be at a high level, but this is another piece that does add a bit of versatility in that sense, can call a bit. So I like the idea of that being able to double up. I like having some more firepower in the team. In-game leader issues are still there, but perhaps this is going to be something that helps there, because if Shocks can get to a good individual level, offload some of the in-game leader duties to AmaNEk, or if AmaNEk gets a really good level, then Shocks can be more of an in-game leader. Okay, fair enough. I still personally think one more roster move at least is needed. I think the obvious player would be someone like Jax, but I would like either a good in-game leader, doesn't have to be French, or a player with some real punch. a player that can really add extra level of firepower to this team, really take us to a high level, and then let's make it just an open cash Dust 2 team, and let's frag people's heads off. Because at the moment, they're close enough, but they're not quite there. Like, if I had to pick a player, I mean, bearing in mind, I just know politically Scream's not going to get a chance here. That would be a cool one, obviously. The obvious one for me would be you'd take MBK or Apex. You take your pick as to which. Both of them play different style, different roles. Either of them, and you put one of them on this team. Now it'd really be cooking with gas. It's no point putting Ziwu because we have to basically kick Kenny S to do that. So, I mean, I'd agree Ziwu's better than Kenny S at the moment, but long term, it's not a bad thing to be holding on to Kenny S and trying to put a team together that gradually gets together, and then hopefully he comes around as he has done for most years in his career and becomes a very good player again. I don't think that's an unreasonable expectation. Still a mess of a team, but something of a decent move. Seems like an upgrade. Seems like a step in the right direction, but still just a step for my money. This video was supported by Dean Tanglis, Andreas Snazore Westerlund, James Harding, NateDOhDoubleG, OllieJ, Tobias Bernasconi, Travis Greb, Tristan Jones, Daniel Olivar, Jiangheng Lu, and special thanks, as always, goes out to Jerky's Minion, one of my OGs. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? Maybe you want to ask me a question. I have a monthly AMA. Perhaps you want teasers for who the next guests are on my upcoming talk shows. Maybe you want to be part of my monthly discussion where my top patrons talk to me. Well, put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrilluminati today at the description box link for Patreon.